I still remember that night, the night I almost disappeared from this world. The rain was pouring so hard it felt like the sky itself was crying with me. I was sitting alone on a cold park bench at 2 a.m., completely broken, completely lost. My phone was off, my heart was empty, and honestly, I didn't think anyone would even notice if I was gone. That was the darkest moment of my life. But then, she appeared. A girl I had never seen before walked slowly through the rain, holding a black umbrella. She stopped right in front of me and looked into my eyes like she could see every secret I was trying to hide. And then she said something that completely shocked me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask why I was crying. Instead, she softly said, "You don't have to pretend to be strong tonight." I froze. Because somehow, this stranger understood me better than anyone ever had. That night, she saved me. But what I didn't know was this. The mysterious girl who saved my life that night, would soon become the girl who stole my heart. I didn't know her name. I didn't know where she came from. And honestly, at that moment, I didn't even understand why she stopped for me. The rain was still falling hard around us, hitting the pavement and the metal bench with a quiet rhythm. Normally, that sound would have been peaceful, but that night it only made the silence heavier. She was still standing there, holding the umbrella above both of us. I slowly lifted my head and looked at her again. Her face was calm, almost strangely calm. Like she wasn't surprised to see someone crying alone in the middle of the night. Like she had seen pain before. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. I felt embarrassed. My eyes were red, my hair was messy, and I was sitting there like a completely broken person in front of a stranger. So I quickly wiped my tears with my sleeve and tried to look away. "Sorry," I muttered quietly. "I didn't mean to bother anyone." She tilted her head slightly, watching me carefully. "You're not bothering anyone," she said softly. Her voice was warm, gentle, the kind of voice that makes you feel safe without even trying. But that only made it worse. Because when someone is kind to you when you're at your weakest, it's harder to hold your emotions together. I swallowed hard and looked down at the wet ground again. "You don't have to stay," I said. "I'll be fine." Even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. She didn't move. Instead, she slowly sat down on the other side of the bench. Still holding the umbrella so the rain wouldn't hit me. That small gesture caught me off guard. Most people would have just walked away. Most people would have pretended not to notice. But she stayed. Another moment of silence passed between us. Finally, she spoke again. "Do you come here often?" The question surprised me. It was such a normal question, like we were two strangers casually talking in a cafe instead of sitting in a dark rainy park at 2 in the morning. I shook my head slowly. "No." My voice barely came out. "I just needed somewhere quiet tonight." She nodded like she understood. And strangely, I felt like she actually did. The wind blew softly through the park, making the trees sway above us. A few raindrops slipped off the edge of the umbrella and fell onto my jacket. I noticed something then. Her hand holding the umbrella was slightly shaking. Just a little. Like she was cold. "You're getting wet," I said quietly. "You should go home." She looked at me and smiled faintly. "I could say the same thing about you." I let out a weak laugh. It was the first time I had smiled that entire night. But the truth was, I didn't want to go home. Home was the reason I was here in the first place. I stared at the wet pavement again. For a moment, I thought about telling her everything. About the fight. About the things that were said. About how the person I trusted the most had completely shattered my heart just a few hours earlier. But how do you tell a stranger something like that? You don't. So I stayed quiet. She seemed to notice the hesitation in my eyes. I don't need to know what happened, she said gently. But I do know one thing. I looked up at her. What? She looked directly at me. And the seriousness in her expression made my chest tighten. Whatever it is, it's not the end of your story. Her words hung in the air between us. Simple. But powerful. And for some reason, they hit me harder than anything anyone had said to me before. I stared at her, confused. How can you be so sure? For a moment, she didn't answer. Her eyes moved away from mine and toward the rain falling beyond the umbrella. Then she said something that made my heart skip. Because I've been exactly where you are. That caught my attention immediately. What do you mean? She hesitated. Like she wasn't sure how much she wanted to reveal. But after a few seconds, she sighed quietly. A few years ago, she said slowly, I was the girl sitting on that bench. My eyebrows furrowed. You? She nodded. Alone. Crying. Feeling like nothing in my life made sense anymore. Her voice was calm, but there was pain hidden underneath it. The kind of pain you only recognize if you've felt it yourself. So what changed? I asked. She looked back at me. You keep going. That's it. That's it. Her answer was simple. But something about the way she said it made it sound like the hardest thing in the world. The rain was slowly starting to calm down now. The park was quieter. Almost peaceful. For the first time that night, I didn't feel completely alone anymore. I looked at her again. You still haven't told me your name. She smiled slightly. Lena. The name felt soft when she said it. Lena, I repeated. And you? She asked. Emma. Nice to meet you, Emma. I nodded slowly. Nice to meet you too. And somehow, that simple introduction felt like the beginning of something important. But at that moment, I had no idea just how much that night would change my life. Because the girl who sat beside me under that umbrella, the girl who refused to leave when I was at my lowest, would soon become the most important person in my world. And loving her, would be the most beautiful, and the most painful decision I would ever make. For a while, neither of us spoke again. The rain had almost stopped now. Only a few drops were still falling from the leaves above us, landing softly on the pavement. The park felt different. Not as heavy as before. Not as lonely. I glanced at Lena from the corner of my eye. She was quietly watching the empty path in front of us, like she was deep in thought. It was strange. An hour ago, I had been completely alone, convinced that no one in the world cared where I was. And now, a stranger was sitting next to me in the middle of the night, sharing my silence like it was the most natural thing in the world. Do you always rescue random girls in parks? I asked quietly. She laughed softly. It wasn't a loud laugh. More like a quiet breath of amusement. Only the ones who look like they really need someone to sit with them. I looked down at my hands. Then I must have looked pretty pathetic. Not pathetic, she said immediately. Just hurt. The way she corrected me made my chest tighten a little. No judgment. No pity. Just understanding. After a moment, she stood up from the bench and stretched slightly. You're freezing, she said, looking at my soaked sleeves. I'm fine. You're shivering. I hadn't even realized it, but she was right. My hands were trembling from the cold. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly removed her coat. Before I could react, she gently placed it around my shoulders. Lena, you don't have to. It's okay, she interrupted softly. I run warm. The coat was still warm from her body. And it smelled faintly like vanilla and rain. Something about that simple gesture made my throat tighten again. Thank you, I whispered. She nodded casually, like it was nothing. But to me, it wasn't nothing. It was the first act of kindness I had felt in a long time. Lena looked around the quiet park and then checked the time on her phone. It's almost 3 in the morning, she said. Yet. You should probably get home. The word home made my stomach twist again. She noticed the change in my expression immediately. You don't want to go back, she said gently. It wasn't a question. I shook my head slowly. No. She didn't push for details. Instead, she leaned slightly against the bench beside me. Then don't go yet. I blinked in surprise. What? If you're not ready, you don't have to. Her voice was calm, like she was offering the most obvious solution in the world. Sometimes, she continued, people just need time before facing things again. I studied her face carefully. You're really good at this. At what? Understanding people. She shrugged. I just listen. Another moment of quiet passed between us. Then she suddenly asked something unexpected. Do you like late-night coffee? I looked at her, confused. Coffee. She smiled slightly. There's a small cafe about 2 blocks from here. At 3 in the morning. It's open 24 hours. I hesitated. The idea felt strange, going somewhere with a girl I had met less than an hour ago. But at the same time, the thought of sitting alone in that park again felt worse. And for some reason, I trusted her. Okay, I said quietly. Her smile grew a little brighter. Good. She opened the umbrella again and gestured for me to stand. As we started walking down the dimly lit park path, I noticed something. For someone who seemed so calm, Lena walked like someone who had 1,000 thoughts in her head. Her steps were slow but confident. Like she knew exactly where she was going. The city streets were almost empty. Only a few cars passed occasionally, their headlights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Neither of us spoke much while we walked. But the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt comfortable. When we reached the cafe, warm yellow lights glowed through the large windows. Inside, only 2 other people were sitting at separate tables, quietly drinking coffee. The place smelled like fresh espresso and baked bread. It felt safe. We sat at a small table near the window. The waitress came over with sleepy eyes and gave us 2 menus. But Lena didn't even look at hers. 2 hot chocolates, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Hot chocolate? You look like you need something better than coffee tonight. I couldn't help smiling. Fair enough. A few minutes later, the drinks arrived. The warm cup in my hands felt amazing after being in the cold rain for so long. I took a sip. It was sweet, comforting. For the first time that night, my body started to relax. Lena watched me carefully from across the table. Better. Much. She nodded with satisfaction. We sat there quietly for a moment. Then she asked softly, So, Emma. Yet. What usually makes you happy? The question caught me off guard. I stared at my cup for a moment, thinking. I don't know, I admitted. I guess, music. Music. Yet. I play guitar sometimes. Her eyes lit up slightly. Really? Not professionally or anything. Still, she said, leaning forward slightly. That's pretty cool. What about you? I asked. What makes you happy? She paused. For a brief moment, something serious passed across her face. But then she smiled again. Tonight. Yet. She looked directly into my eyes. Making sure you're okay. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked down at my drink to hide the sudden warmth spreading across my face. Why did that make me feel nervous? She laughed softly when she noticed my reaction. Relax, she said. I'm not flirting with you. Oh, I said quickly. I didn't think you were. But the truth was, part of me had wondered. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms casually. You're interesting, Emma. Interesting how? Most people talk a lot when they're nervous. You don't. I observe first. That explained a lot. She had been watching me carefully since the moment we met. Not in a creepy way. More like someone trying to understand a puzzle. And strangely, I didn't mind. Outside the cafe window, the rain had completely stopped. The streets were quiet again. But inside that warm little cafe, something new had begun. Something unexpected. Because what started as a random meeting in the rain, was slowly turning into the beginning of a story neither of us could have predicted. And I had no idea yet, that the mysterious girl sitting across from me, was about to become the most important person in my life. For the next few minutes, we sat quietly in the warm cafe, the soft hum of the espresso machine filling the silence between us. It was strange. Normally, silence with someone you just met feels awkward, uncomfortable. But with Lena, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt calm. Safe. I wrapped both of my hands around the warm mug of hot chocolate, letting the heat slowly bring life back to my fingers. Outside the window, the wet street reflected the golden cafe lights like small pools of melted gold. Lena was still watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel like she was trying to understand something deeper. So, she said finally, breaking the silence. Do you always go through emotional breakdowns in public parks? I laughed quietly. Only on special occasions. She smiled. Well, I'm honored I got to witness it. I rolled my eyes slightly. Lucky you. Her smile softened, and then she leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. Do you want to talk about what happened tonight? The question hung in the air. For a moment, I thought about lying. Saying something simple. Something easy. But for some reason, I didn't want to lie to her. Maybe it was the way she had stayed with me in the rain. Maybe it was the calm way she listened. Or maybe it was because she was a stranger, and strangers are sometimes easier to talk to than people who know you. I took a slow breath. My girlfriend broke up with me tonight. The words felt heavy leaving my mouth. Lena didn't react dramatically. She didn't gasp. She didn't say I'm sorry. She simply nodded slowly, like she had expected something like that. That explains the park, she said gently. Yet. I stared down at the table. She said she needed something different. Different. She didn't really explain it. The memory still hurt. The way those words were said. The way she avoided my eyes while saying them. I thought everything was fine, I continued quietly. But apparently, she had already decided. Lena remained silent, giving me space to speak. She packed her things, I said. And just left. I laughed weakly. 3 years together, and it ended in about 15 minutes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Lena asked softly, "Do you still love her?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Finally, I shook my head slowly. No. She raised an eyebrow slightly. That was quick. It's not that simple, I said. I don't love her anymore, but I loved the version of her I thought she was. Lena nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. I looked up at her. You've been through something like that too, haven't you? For the first time since we met, Lena looked slightly uncomfortable. Just for a second. Then she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Something like that. What happened? She looked out the window for a moment before answering. I trusted the wrong person, that's it. That's the short version. Something about the way she said it made me realize there was a much deeper story behind those words. But she didn't seem ready to share it. So I didn't push. Instead, I asked something else. Why did you stop for me tonight? She looked back at me. What do you mean? In the park. You could have just walked past. Most people would have. She thought about it for a moment. Then she shrugged slightly. I guess I recognized the look on your face. What look? The I feel like my world just collapsed look. I laughed quietly. So I looked that bad? Pretty bad. Wow. But, she added gently, you also look strong. That surprised me. Strong. Yet. How? Because you were still there. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? Some people disappear when things get hard, she explained. But you didn't. You were sitting there, feeling everything. That takes courage. I had never thought about it that way before. To me, sitting alone crying in the rain had felt like weakness. But Lena saw it differently. And somehow, that made me feel a little less broken. The waitress came back to refill our drinks. By now, the sky outside the window was slowly starting to lighten. Morning was coming. I checked the time. 4:30. Lena looked surprised. Already? Yet. Time moves fast when you're saving strangers from emotional disasters. I smiled. Is that your hobby? Maybe. For a moment, we just looked at each other. And then I realized something strange. I didn't feel like she was a stranger anymore. It felt like I had known her longer than a few hours. Maybe it was the way she listened. Maybe it was the way she spoke. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Something I couldn't quite explain. Lena suddenly stood up. Come on. Where are we going? She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. The sun is about to rise. So you can't sit in a cafe all night after a breakup and miss the sunrise. I blinked. You're serious? Very. Why? She smiled slightly. Because every new day deserves a proper beginning. I couldn't help laughing. You're very philosophical at 5 in the morning. Just come with me. And for the second time that night, I followed Lena somewhere without really knowing why. But deep down, something told me this strange, mysterious girl was about to change my life in ways I couldn't even imagine yet. The air outside the cafe felt different. The rain had completely stopped, and the city was slowly waking up. The streets were still mostly empty, but the sky above us was beginning to change color. The deep dark blue of the night was slowly fading into soft shades of purple and orange. Lena walked a few steps ahead of me, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked. "You'll see," she replied casually. I sighed, but I kept following her. There was something strangely comforting about walking beside her in the quiet early morning. No traffic. No crowds. Just the sound of our footsteps on the damp pavement. After a few minutes, Lena turned down a narrow street that led toward a small hill overlooking the city. When we reached the top, she stopped. "Here." I looked around. It was a small overlook with a simple metal railing facing the skyline. The city stretched out below us, buildings still glowing with the last lights of the night. And above them, the sun was just beginning to rise. Soft golden light slowly spread across the horizon. I stepped closer to the railing, resting my hands on the cool metal. "Wow," I whispered. Lena stood beside me. "Worth the walk?" "Yeah," I admitted. "For sure." For a few minutes, we simply watched the sunrise together. The sky continued changing colors, from purple to pink to warm orange. The city lights slowly turned off one by one as the daylight grew stronger. It felt peaceful. Like the world was starting over. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lena said quietly. "Yeah." I glanced at her. "But you probably see this all the time." She shook her head. "No." "Why not?" "Because most people are asleep at this hour." I laughed softly. "Good point." The wind blew gently across the hill, moving a few loose strands of Lena's hair across her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she suddenly asked something unexpected. "Do you believe people meet for a reason?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's a deep question for sunrise." "I'm serious." I thought about it for a moment. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe." "What about you?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the horizon. "I used to think everything happened for a reason. And now? Now I think, sometimes life just throws people together. Randomly. Like tonight." "Exactly." I leaned against the railing. "So you think us meeting was random?" She glanced at me. "Don't you?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes. But something inside me felt like this night had been different. Special. "I don't know," I said quietly. "It doesn't feel random." Her expression softened slightly. "Why not?" "Because you didn't have to stop." "But you did." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I was just curious." "Curious about what?" "You." That made my heart skip for a moment. I quickly looked back toward the sunrise. "You barely know me." "True." "Then how can you be curious?" "Because sometimes," she said calmly, "you can tell a lot about someone in a single moment." "Like when?" "Like when they're sitting alone in the rain at 2 in the morning." I laughed quietly. "Fair enough." The sun was fully visible now, rising slowly above the buildings. Golden light spread across the city. For the first time since my breakup, I felt something different. Hope. Lena suddenly leaned her arms on the railing beside mine. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If your ex walked back into your life right now, would you take her back?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully. The memories. The arguments. The way she left without looking back. Finally, I shook my head. "No." "Why not?" Because someone who can walk away that easily, probably already did a long time ago. Lena studied my face carefully. You're stronger than you think. I smiled slightly. You keep saying that. Because it's true. For a moment, our eyes met again. And this time, the moment lasted a little longer. There was something different in the way she looked at me now. Something warmer. Something softer. My heart started beating a little faster. Which was strange, considering I had just been crying over someone else a few hours earlier. Lena seemed to notice the shift too. She quickly looked back toward the city. So, she said casually. What are your plans today? Honestly. Yet. Sleep. She laughed. That's a good plan. What about you? She shrugged. I usually go for a run around this time. At 6 in the morning. Yet. You're one of those people. One of what people? Healthy people. She grinned. I try. We both laughed again. But then something unexpected happened. A strong gust of wind suddenly blew across the hill. Before I could react, Lena instinctively reached out and grabbed my arm to steady me. Her hand wrapped gently around my wrist. The contact was brief. But it was enough to send a strange warmth through my chest. She seemed to notice it too. Because for a second, neither of us moved. Then she slowly let go. Sorry, she said quietly. It's okay. But the moment had already changed something. The air between us felt different now. More charged. More aware. And as the sun continued rising behind us, I had the strange feeling that the night I thought had broken me, was actually the night something new had begun. Something unexpected. Something dangerous. Because the mysterious girl who saved me from my darkest moment, was slowly becoming someone I didn't want to walk away from. For a moment after the wind passed, neither of us moved. The sun had climbed higher now, covering the city in soft golden light. Morning traffic was beginning to appear on the streets below us, small cars moving like tiny streams of color between the buildings. But up on that hill, it still felt quiet. Peaceful. Lena stepped back slightly, sliding her hands into the pockets of her coat again. Well, she said with a small smile. You survived the night. I leaned back against the railing. Barely. But you did. I exhaled slowly. She was right. A few hours earlier, I had been sitting alone in the rain feeling like everything in my life had fallen apart. And now, I was standing on a hill watching the sunrise with a girl I had just met. Life was weird like that. So what now? I asked. Lena tilted her head slightly. What do you mean? Well, you saved the sad stranger in the park. Mission accomplished. She laughed. I wouldn't go that far. But you're definitely doing better than earlier. She wasn't wrong. The heavy weight in my chest had eased. Not completely, but enough to breathe again. Thanks to you, I said. She waved the comment away casually. Don't give me too much credit. Why not? Because you're the one who stayed. I rolled my eyes slightly. You're really committed to that philosophy, hey? Very. We started walking back down the hill together. The streets were slowly filling with early commuters and people opening their shops. The quiet nighttime world we had shared was disappearing. And for a moment, I wondered something. Was this the end of it? Would we just go our separate ways now that the night was over? The thought felt strangely disappointing. As we reached the sidewalk, Lena suddenly stopped. What? She looked at me with a playful expression. Breakfast. Breakfast. You can't face a new day on just hot chocolate. I thought you were going for a run. I can run later. You're changing your routine for me. She shrugged. Maybe. I couldn't help smiling. You're very spontaneous. Life is more interesting that way. There was a small bakery across the street that had just opened. Warm light spilled out through the windows, and the smell of fresh bread drifted into the cool morning air. Come on, Lena said. Best croissants in the city. You say that like you've tried them all. I have. Inside the bakery, the atmosphere was cozy and warm. Soft music played quietly in the background, and the display case was filled with fresh pastries. We ordered 2 croissants and coffee, then sat at a small table near the window. The moment felt strangely normal. Like we were just 2 friends meeting for breakfast. But something deeper was slowly growing underneath that normal surface. So, Lena said, taking a sip of her coffee. What do you usually do when you're not dramatically crying in parks? I laughed. Wow, you're never going to let that go, are you? Probably not. Well, I work at a small music store. Her eyes lit up immediately. Really? Yeah. I told you I play guitar sometimes. That's actually really cool. What about you? I asked. What do you do? She hesitated for a brief moment before answering. I do some freelance photography. Photography? Yeah. That explains a lot. Like what? The way you observe people. She smiled slightly. Occupational habit. I studied her face for a moment. You must have some interesting stories. A few. Like. She leaned back in her chair thoughtfully. I once spent 3 days in the mountains photographing a storm. 3 days. Worth it. Why? Because the final photo captured lightning hitting the peak of a mountain at sunset. That sounds amazing. It was. I noticed something then. Whenever Lena talked about photography, her entire expression changed. Her eyes became brighter. More alive. It was the first time I saw genuine excitement in her. You really love it, I said. She nodded slowly. It makes me feel free. The word free lingered in my mind. Free from what? I asked. She paused. And for a moment, that same shadow from earlier returned to her expression. Just life, she said quietly. I sensed there was more behind that answer. But again, she didn't elaborate. So I didn't push. Instead, I took a bite of my croissant. It was warm and buttery. Okay, I admitted. You were right. About what? These are the best croissants in the city. She grinned proudly. I told you. Outside the window, the city was fully awake now. People were walking past, cars were moving, and the ordinary rhythm of the day had begun. But inside that small bakery, it still felt like we were living in a little bubble of time. A moment that didn't belong to the rest of the world. Lena finished her coffee and looked at me thoughtfully. Can I ask you something else? You ask a lot of questions. I'm curious. Okay, go ahead. She leaned slightly forward. Do you regret meeting me tonight? The question surprised me. Why would I regret it? Because you met me on the worst night of your life. I shook my head immediately. No. Why not? I thought about it carefully before answering. Because it might have been the worst night of my life. But it was also the night I met you. For a moment, Lena didn't say anything. She simply looked at me. And the expression on her face told me something had just shifted between us. Something deeper than friendship. Something neither of us had expected when the night began. And for the first time, I started to wonder if the mysterious girl who saved me from my darkest moment, was about to become something much more important. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk through the quiet streets. The city was slowly coming alive, but the streets near the river were still calm, just a few early risers jogging or walking dogs. Lena suggested we take a detour along the riverbank. The morning sun reflected on the water, creating ripples of gold and silver that danced with every small wave. I felt a strange sense of peace as we walked side by side, the warmth of her coat still lingering on my shoulders. "You always know the perfect spots," I said quietly, watching the sunlight glint off the water. "I like places where you can think," she replied, glancing at me. "Places where the world feels like it's paused for a moment." I smiled softly. "That's nice. I haven't felt like the world paused in a long time." She looked at me, her eyes catching the sunlight in a way that made them glow. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe properly. "Emma," she said gently, her voice low. "You've been carrying a lot lately." "I know," I admitted. "I didn't even realize how heavy it was until tonight." She stopped walking and turned to face me. The soft morning breeze tangled a few strands of her hair around her face. I wanted to reach out and push them away, but my hands froze at my sides. "You don't have to hide anything from me," she said softly. "Not tonight. Not ever." My heart started beating faster. There was a vulnerability in her voice I hadn't expected. Something about it made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. We continued walking in silence, but this time, it wasn't awkward. Every glance she threw my way made my stomach tighten. Every small smile, every tilt of her head, felt like it was meant just for me. At one point, she grabbed my hand lightly, almost accidentally, as she reached for a low-hanging branch. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I realized I hadn't wanted her to let go. "Emma," she asked, her voice hesitant. "You feel that too, right?" I hesitated. Did I really want to admit it, that I was already feeling something I couldn't explain? "Yes," I whispered. "I do." Her lips curved into a small, shy smile. "Good. Because I do too." For the next hour, we walked along the river, talking about everything and nothing. Music, photography, dreams we'd never told anyone. There was an intimacy in our conversation that made it feel like we'd known each other far longer than a few hours. Finally, we reached a small bridge that overlooked the river, a perfect view of the city bathed in morning light. We leaned against the railing together, the air between us charged with unspoken tension. She glanced at me, her dark eyes shimmering. "I should probably tell you something," she murmured. I looked up at her. "What?" I don't usually get this close to someone this fast." My heart skipped a beat. "Neither do I." She leaned in just slightly. Our faces were so close I could see the faintest freckles across her nose, the soft curve of her lips. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, the world disappeared. Only Lena and I existed, suspended in that delicate pause. And then, she pulled back slightly, biting her lip, as if testing something she wasn't ready to fully admit. "I don't know where this is going," she said softly, almost to herself. "But I want to find out." My heart leapt. Me too. The bridge, the morning, the quiet city, everything felt like it had been waiting for this moment. I had never felt something so sudden, so intense. Something that terrified me and exhilarated me all at once. I reached out, taking her hand in mine deliberately this time. She didn't pull away. And in that simple touch, I realized, the girl who saved me from my darkest night had already begun to change everything in my life. Because this wasn't just gratitude. This wasn't just comfort. This was the beginning of love. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Lena and I wandered through the quieter streets of the city, exploring small parks, hidden cafes, and a little bookstore tucked between two taller buildings. Every corner seemed new and magical when she was beside me. At one point, we stopped at a small outdoor bench under a blooming cherry blossom tree. The petals floated gently in the breeze, landing softly on the pavement around us. She picked one up and twirled it between her fingers, smiling in a way that made my chest ache. "You really notice the little things," I said quietly. "I think it's important," she replied. "Small things tell the biggest stories." I nodded, watching the way the sunlight hit her hair, making it glow like molten gold. I wanted to reach out, touch it, but I hesitated. Every nerve in my body felt alive, buzzing with something I couldn't quite name. We sat together on the bench, sharing stories of our childhoods, our dreams, and the small regrets we'd carried for years. It was intimate, in a way that left me both exhilarated and scared. I realized just how quickly I had come to trust her, how easily her presence made me feel safe. "You know," Lena said softly, leaning slightly closer, "I didn't expect tonight, or today, to feel like this." I looked at her, my heart tightening. "Like what?" "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She paused, her gaze locking with mine. "I haven't felt this, connected to someone in a long time." The air around us felt heavy with something unspoken. My fingers itched to reach for hers, to close the distance, but I hesitated, afraid of ruining the fragile, perfect moment. Then, as if reading my thoughts, she shifted slightly, her hand brushing against mine. The touch was gentle, almost accidental, but it sent a jolt straight to my heart. I looked at her, and our eyes met. "I feel the same," I whispered. Her lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. "I was hoping you would." The world seemed to pause. The soft rustle of cherry blossom petals, the distant hum of the city, even the sunlight felt like it existed solely for us. We leaned a little closer. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. Every rational thought I had dissolved, leaving only this, her, me, and the possibility of something more. For a split second, our lips hovered close, the air between us charged with electricity. My mind screamed caution, but my heart refused to listen. But just as I was about to close the distance, a small group of joggers passed by, laughing loudly. Lena pulled back slightly, laughing at the interruption, and I couldn't help but join in. Even in that brief moment of awkwardness, the tension remained. The pull between us had grown undeniable. "You're driving me crazy," she said softly, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. "And you're making it impossible to think straight," I admitted, laughing quietly. We stayed on the bench a while longer, hand in hand this time, talking about everything and nothing. Every glance, every brush of our fingers sent a thrill through me. By the time we stood to leave, the sun had climbed higher. The day was officially underway, but neither of us wanted it to end. As we walked side by side toward the river, I realized something: this wasn't just a fleeting connection. Something deeper had begun, something neither of us could ignore. The girl who saved me from my darkest night had already begun to steal my heart. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Because maybe, just maybe, this was what I had been waiting for all along. The afternoon felt endless, in the best possible way. Lena and I wandered along the riverbank, occasionally stopping to watch the ducks glide across the water or the sunlight reflecting off small ripples. Every laugh, every shared glance, seemed to stretch time into something slower, sweeter, more intimate. We found a quiet little park tucked behind a line of old brick buildings. A wooden swing set sat in the corner, slightly worn, the paint peeling, but inviting. Lena paused beside it, brushing her hand across the weathered wood. "Want to?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Swing?" I laughed, raising an eyebrow. "Why not?" she said, grinning. "I've always loved swings." I hesitated for just a moment before nodding. Soon, we were both swinging gently, side by side, laughing as we tried to see who could swing higher. The carefree joy of the moment was almost intoxicating. For hours or maybe just minutes it felt like the weight of the world had lifted, replaced with something warm and hopeful. Eventually, we stopped swinging and sat together on a low stone wall, overlooking the water. I noticed the subtle shift in the light soft golden hues reflecting on Lena's face. She looked serene, yet there was a vulnerability there that made my chest tighten. "You know," she began softly, "I don't usually open up like this." "I know," I said quietly. "And I don't usually trust someone this fast either." She looked at me, and for a moment, the playful sparkle in her eyes softened into something deeper. "I feel like I can tell you things," she whispered. "Things I haven't told anyone in years." My heartbeat quickened. "Like what?" I asked gently. She hesitated, biting her lip as if weighing whether to continue. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been hurt, badly. Before tonight, I never thought I'd trust someone again." I reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You can trust me," I said softly. "Not because you have to, but because I want you to." Her eyes glistened as she looked at me. The vulnerability in her gaze made something inside me shift. I wanted to protect her, to hold her close, to make sure she never felt alone again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world around us faded, the river, the park, the faint sound of distant traffic all disappeared. There was only Lena, only me, and the undeniable tension between us. Then, almost instinctively, I leaned in slightly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. My lips hovered near hers, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. "You don't have to," I started, but she cut me off with a soft, trembling hand on my cheek. "I want to," she whispered. And in that single word, everything changed. Our lips met. Softly at first, tentative, as if testing the fragile trust we had built over a few short hours. But then, the kiss deepened, carrying all the emotions we hadn't spoken aloud: relief, gratitude, fear, longing, and an undeniable spark of love. When we finally pulled away, we were both breathless. Lena's forehead rested against mine, our breaths mingling. "I didn't expect this," she said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Neither did I admitted. "But I'm glad it happened." She laughed quietly, a sound so soft and intimate that it made my chest ache in the best possible way. We stayed like that for a while, hands entwined, watching the gentle movement of the river beneath the bridge. The kiss had shifted everything, it had broken the final barrier, turning our friendship, our shared vulnerability, into something real, something that neither of us could ignore. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think until now: the girl who saved me from my darkest night wasn't just my savior anymore. She was becoming my first love. And I was falling, faster than I ever thought possible. As the afternoon faded into evening, the city began to take on a warmer glow. The sunlight softened, casting long shadows across the streets, while the sky shifted to shades of amber and rose. Lena and I decided to grab a quiet dinner at a small, tucked-away bistro she knew. The kind of place with dim lights, rustic wooden tables, and the faint aroma of fresh herbs and baked bread. We were seated in a corner booth, close enough that our knees brushed occasionally. The intimacy of the setting, combined with the lingering warmth of the day and the closeness from the kiss earlier, made my heart race in ways I hadn't felt in years. "So," Lena said softly, stirring her wine, "do you usually get swept away this easily?" I laughed, a little nervously. "Only when someone is completely unexpected." She smiled, leaning closer across the table. "Unexpected can be good." "It can," I admitted. "But also dangerous." She tilted her head, studying me. "Dangerous? How?" I shrugged, my fingers tracing invisible patterns on the edge of the table. "Because feelings like this can ruin everything if you're not careful. Especially when it's so fast." Lena's expression softened. "I know. But some things are worth the risk." Her words lingered, and I realized she was talking about more than just the kiss. She was talking about trust. About letting someone in when it could hurt you. About risking your heart. For a while, we spoke less and just ate, the silence filled with a quiet comfort. I kept stealing glances at her, watching the way her eyes caught the light from the candles, how her smile grew just slightly when she laughed. I couldn't help it, I was captivated. After dinner, we walked along the streets as the city lights blinked on one by one. The air was cooler now, and I shivered slightly. Lena noticed immediately, slipping her arm through mine. "You're cold," she murmured. "I'm fine," I replied, but the warmth of her arm against mine made me forget the chill. We found ourselves back at the small hill overlooking the city, the skyline now illuminated in a soft golden glow from the streetlights. We sat together on the same stone wall from earlier, the city stretching below us. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder. "Emma," she whispered. "Yeah. I know tonight and today have been sudden. Intense." I nodded, my heart still racing from the day. "Yeah. But," she continued, "I feel like I can be honest with you. Completely. Even with just a few hours together." Her words made my chest ache with emotion. I turned slightly to face her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I feel the same way. I haven't trusted anyone like this in forever." She smiled softly, her forehead resting against mine. "Then let's just be here. Now. No past, no expectations, no pressure." I nodded. "Okay." The city lights reflected in her eyes, and for the first time that evening, I felt completely present, not thinking about heartbreaks, not worrying about what might happen next, just existing with her in that quiet, perfect moment. We stayed like that for a long while, talking in whispers, sharing small secrets, laughter, and comfortable silences. The world around us felt distant. Time had slowed, leaving only us and the fragile, budding connection between our hearts. But even in this perfect moment, I couldn't shake a tiny flicker of doubt in the back of my mind. Was it possible to fall for someone this quickly? Could the intensity of today survive tomorrow? I pushed the thought aside for now. It didn't matter tonight. Tonight was about Lena and me. About trust, closeness, and the undeniable spark between us. And as the stars began to dot the sky above the city, I felt it. The night that had begun with heartbreak had turned into something unforgettable. Something that might just change my life forever. Night had fully settled over the city, the streets quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant car. Lena and I walked slowly, the air crisp against our skin. Her hand still found mine occasionally, and each time it did, my chest fluttered in a way I couldn't control. We stopped at a small park we hadn't explored before. The lights were dim, the grass damp with evening dew, and the faint sound of a fountain rippling in the distance added a soft rhythm to the silence. Lena pulled her coat a little tighter around her shoulders. "It's colder than I expected," she murmured. "You're not going to let me carry you, are you?" I teased lightly, though my hand lingered near hers. She laughed softly. "Maybe. But I don't want to take advantage of your kindness." "Kindness?" I raised an eyebrow. "I call it self-preservation, keeping you from freezing while I secretly enjoy it." She rolled her eyes, smiling. "Smooth. Very smooth." As we walked along the path, I noticed a subtle tension in her voice when she spoke about herself. Something I hadn't seen earlier. Something carefully hidden. "What's on your mind?" I asked gently. She paused, then sighed softly. "I don't usually open up like this. And I'm not sure I can handle everything at once. Feelings, trust, expectations, it's complicated." Her words weren't new. I had felt that same fear earlier, but hearing her voice tremble slightly made it real. The vulnerability between us, the fragility of the moment, sent my heart racing. "I get it," I said softly. "I'm not asking for everything right now. I just want to be here with you. That's enough." She glanced at me, her eyes catching the dim lamplight, glimmering with uncertainty and something else, hope. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if this, what if us, doesn't work?" I stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Then at least we tried," I said firmly, taking her hands in mine. "At least we let ourselves feel something real. That's more than most people get." She bit her lip, her gaze dropping briefly before meeting mine again. "You make it sound so simple." "Not simple," I admitted. "But worth it. Everything worth having takes risk." She studied me for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay." For a while, we walked in silence, the tension easing slightly, replaced by warmth and a renewed closeness. The first hint of challenge, the fear of vulnerability and the unknown, had been acknowledged. But instead of pulling us apart, it seemed to draw us closer, creating a bond forged not just in laughter and joy, but in honesty and trust. We reached a quiet bench near the fountain and sat together, side by side. Our hands remained intertwined, fingers laced naturally. I felt the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against my arm, a reassuring presence in the cool night air. "You know," Lena said after a few moments, leaning her head lightly on my shoulder, "I wasn't sure I could feel this so quickly. But I do. And it scares me." "I know," I whispered. "It scares me too. But some things are worth being scared of." She smiled softly against my shoulder, and for the first time, I realized just how much she had begun to mean to me. Not just as someone who saved me from a lonely night, but as someone who could truly be part of my life. Someone I wanted to know completely, someone I could trust. And as the night deepened around us, the stars shimmering faintly above, I knew one thing: the journey with Lena wasn't going to be easy. But I didn't want it to be. Because some stories worth telling are the ones where love and fear, joy and doubt, risk and reward, all collide in the most unexpected way. And this was ours. The following morning, the city seemed different, softer somehow, quieter. Perhaps it was because Lena and I had stayed up later than usual, talking and walking until the night felt like it belonged only to us. We met again at a small cafe, the one we had discovered on our first day together. The early sunlight filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. Lena was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual corner table, a cup of coffee in her hands. "You're early," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I couldn't wait," she said with a small smile. "Besides, I like mornings." We drank in silence for a few moments, the kind of comfortable silence that no longer felt empty. "Emma," she said finally, her voice a little more serious. "I have to tell you, there might be complications." I frowned slightly. "Complications?" She nodded. "It's nothing bad, exactly, but I don't want you to get hurt. My life is messy sometimes. People, past experiences, obligations, it's a lot to manage." I studied her face. The vulnerability was clear, yet she carried it with a kind of quiet strength. "Lena, I'm not asking for perfection. I just want honesty. And you've always been honest with me, haven't you?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I guess I have." "Then we'll handle the rest as it comes," I said firmly. "Together." Her eyes softened, and I felt the first real shift in our connection, not just attraction or comfort, but a willingness to face uncertainty together. We spent the morning wandering the city again, visiting a small art gallery Lena loved. She pointed out her favorite paintings, explaining the stories she imagined behind each one. I watched her with fascination, noticing the subtle gestures, the way she tilted her head, how her eyes lit up, the soft way she laughed at a joke only she seemed to understand. By lunchtime, we were sitting on a low wall near a small fountain, sharing sandwiches we had picked up from a nearby deli. The day was warm now, the sun high and bright, and the world seemed to pause around us once again. "I feel like we're moving too fast," Lena said quietly, her gaze fixed on the fountain water. I reached over, taking her hand gently. "Maybe. But the pace doesn't matter. What matters is that we're honest with each other." She looked at me, her eyes glistening, and for a moment I could see both fear and hope shining there. "I want to trust you," she said softly. "I really do. It's just, sometimes I get scared." "I know," I whispered. "And it's okay to be scared. That's what makes this real. That's what makes it worth it." She smiled faintly, leaning her head against my shoulder. The city noise faded behind us, leaving only the warmth of her body and the steady beat of her heart against mine. For the first time, I realized how strong our connection had become. Not just attraction, not just comfort, but a deep, unspoken understanding. One that had been built through laughter, trust, vulnerability, and even the fears we hadn't yet spoken aloud. But even as I held her hand and felt the weight of the day's sunlight on our shoulders, I knew this bond would soon be tested. The outside world with its complications, misunderstandings, and past wounds would challenge us. And yet, I didn't feel afraid. Because whatever came next, Lena and I had already taken the hardest step, opening our hearts completely, even in the face of uncertainty. For now, that was enough. And as the fountain rippled gently in front of us, sparkling in the sunlight, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: I wasn't letting her go. Not now. Not ever. The evening came quickly, the sun dipping behind the city skyline, painting the streets in shades of pink and deep orange. Lena and I had spent the day wandering aimlessly, exploring tiny streets, laughing at small cafes, taking photographs, and stealing quiet moments together. Everything had felt easy, effortless, and perfect. But as we walked back toward her apartment, I noticed a subtle shift in her expression. Her brow was slightly furrowed, her pace slower, as if she were wrestling with something she hadn't yet said. "Lena," I asked softly, falling into step beside her. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, glancing at me quickly before looking down at the pavement. "Emma, there's something I need to tell you." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" I might have to leave the city for a while." Her voice trembled slightly. "Something personal came up. It's complicated, and I can't avoid it." I stopped walking, the words hitting me harder than I expected. "Leave how long?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Days, maybe weeks. I don't have a choice. And I didn't want to tell you until I was sure." I felt my chest tighten. After all the trust, all the laughter, the kisses, the moments that had made my heart feel so full, the thought of her leaving so soon was unbearable. "Lena," I said gently, taking her hands in mine, "you don't have to go through this alone. Whatever it is, we can face it together." She shook her head slowly, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "It's not that simple. I can't bring you into it, it's messy, and I don't want to hurt you." "You won't hurt me," I said firmly. "You being honest with me is the only thing that matters. That's how we stay together, through honesty, through trust." She looked at me, and I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes amidst the fear. But the tension in her shoulders told me she was torn between her responsibilities and her feelings. She whispered, biting her lip, "I've been hurt before, Emma. I don't want to make the same mistakes again." "I know," I said softly. "And I don't expect you to be perfect. I just want you. All of you, even the messy parts. That's what makes us real." She blinked back tears, and for a long moment, we just stood there, hands intertwined, hearts racing, the city's evening lights casting a warm glow around us. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try. But promise me you won't give up on me, even if things get difficult." "I promise," I said, my voice firm, filled with certainty. "I won't give up. Not now. Not ever." She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. "I don't deserve you," she murmured softly. "You do," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You deserve everything. And I'm not going anywhere." The moment stretched, suspended in time. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty, they all existed, but beneath it was something stronger, a bond built in hours but forged in trust and courage. And as the city lights flickered around us, I realized something important: love wasn't just about the easy moments. It was about choosing to stay, even when the future was uncertain, even when the world tried to pull you apart. Tonight, Lena and I had taken that step. And somehow, I knew that whatever challenges came next, we would face them together. The night had grown quiet, the city almost asleep beneath a canopy of stars. Lena and I walked slowly toward her apartment, the air cool against our skin, our hands still intertwined. Every step felt heavier now, weighed down by the unspoken tension of her upcoming absence. "I hate that I have to leave," Lena said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I hate leaving, and I hate feeling like I'm dragging you into this." I stopped walking and turned to face her, cupping her face gently in my hands. "You're not dragging me anywhere," I said firmly. "You've been honest with me, and that's all I've ever needed. I'm not going to run just because life gets complicated." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I could feel her trembling slightly. "But what if it's too much for us?" "It won't be," I said, my voice steady. We're stronger than that. We've shared everything in just a few days: laughter, fear, joy, vulnerability. That's not easy, Lena. That's real. And I want real with you, no matter how hard it gets. She leaned into my touch, resting her forehead against mine. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, I admitted. It's terrifying. But that's what makes it worth it. For a long moment, we just stood there, suspended in the quiet night, the hum of the city around us fading into the background. Then Lena whispered, almost shyly, I don't want to lose this, us. You won't, I said softly, brushing my thumb across her cheek. Not to distance, not to fear, not to anything. We'll make it through. Together. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, as if trying to steady herself. Okay, she murmured. Together. We continued walking, slower this time, savoring the remaining moments before reality crept back in. The bond between us had deepened not just through laughter and kisses, but through the acknowledgement of fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty. By the time we reached her apartment, the tension hadn't fully disappeared, but it had transformed. It was no longer a barrier, it was a bridge, a connection that made each touch, each glance, each whispered word more meaningful. Before she went inside, Lena paused and looked up at me. Promise me something. Anything, I said. Promise me we'll fight for this, no matter what. Even if it gets hard. I promise, I said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I promise, Lena. She smiled faintly, the kind of small, tender smile that makes your heart ache in the best way. And then she slipped inside, leaving me standing in the quiet street, my heart full, my mind racing. For the first time, I understood the weight of trust, the fragility of new love, and the courage it took to hold on. Lena wasn't just someone I had met on a rainy night, she was becoming someone I couldn't imagine my life without. And whatever challenges awaited us, I knew one thing, I would fight for her. For us. For the love that had bloomed so suddenly, so unexpectedly, yet felt inevitable. The night stretched on, the city glowing softly around me, and I whispered into the wind, we're going to be okay, Lena. I promise. The next few days passed like a whirlwind. Lena and I tried to savor every moment together, yet a quiet tension lingered in the background, her impending absence casting a shadow over even the brightest hours. We spent the morning at her favorite photography spot, a small overlook above the city where she loved to capture sunrise shots. The air was crisp, the city stretching below us in soft golden light. She crouched beside her camera, adjusting the lens, while I watched silently, admiring the concentration etched across her face. You're amazing at this, I said quietly, my voice breaking the silence. She glanced at me, her lips curving into a faint smile. I could say the same about you. You have this patience. This calmness I didn't think I'd find so quickly in someone. My heart ached. There it was again, the reminder that our time together was limited. I forced a smile. We make a good team. She laughed softly, but I could see the tension in her eyes. After a few moments, she lowered her camera and turned toward me. Emma. I don't want to leave, but I have to. And I'm terrified that when I'm gone, this, us, will fall apart. I stepped closer, taking her hands in mine. Lena, listen to me. Nothing can undo what we've built in these past days. The feelings, the trust, it's real. And it doesn't vanish just because distance gets in the way. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. But what if it's not enough? It will be, I said firmly. I'll fight for this. For you. For us. You've already changed my life, Lena. And I'm not letting go, not to distance, not to fear, not to anything. She blinked rapidly, swallowing hard. You really mean that? Every word, I said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. I don't care how hard it gets. We'll figure it out. Together. For a long moment, we stood there, hands entwined, foreheads pressed together, just breathing. The world around us, the bustling city below, the sunlight catching on the rooftops faded into a quiet, sacred space that belonged only to us. Then, she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine. I've never felt this way before, she whispered. It's terrifying, but I can't deny it. Me neither, I admitted. It's terrifying for me too. But I've never wanted anything more in my life than this. Than you. Her lips curved into a soft, trembling smile. Then we'll make it through, she murmured. We have to. And in that moment, despite the fear and uncertainty, I felt something stronger than doubt, hope. A hope built on honesty, trust, and a love that had taken root in the most unexpected of nights. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Lena and I had already faced the hardest one, choosing each other when everything else was uncertain. And somehow, that made me believe we could survive anything together. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light over the city, I realized this: love wasn't easy. Love was messy, complicated, and sometimes frightening. But love, true, deep love, was worth every ounce of fear. And I was ready to fight for it. The morning of Lena's departure arrived with a quiet tension that neither of us could shake. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light over the city streets, yet my chest felt heavy, as if the air itself were pressing down on me. We met outside her apartment, bags in hand, her expression a mixture of determination and hesitation. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I thought I might never let go. Emma. She whispered, her voice trembling. I wish I didn't have to leave. I know, I said softly, holding her at arm's length so I could see her face. But we'll get through this. I promise you, Lena. Distance doesn't change what we have. Her eyes glistened with tears. It's not just distance, it's everything. The past, the complications. I'm scared it'll break us. I cupped her face in my hands. Lena, listen. We've faced fear, uncertainty, and vulnerability already. We survived. And more than that, we chose each other. That's what matters. Nothing else can undo that. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. You really mean that? Every word, I said firmly. I'm not letting go, Lena. Not now. Not ever. We shared one last kiss before she turned toward the taxi waiting at the curb. My heart ached in a way I hadn't imagined possible. I watched as she lifted her hand in a small wave, trying to smile through the tears that threatened to spill. The taxi pulled away slowly, and I stood there, feeling the empty space she had left behind, as if the city itself had grown colder. My chest felt heavy, yet beneath the ache was a steady pulse of determination. We had promised each other honesty, trust, and patience. We would endure. Over the next few days, we kept in constant contact: calls, texts, and video chats. Each conversation was a lifeline, a thread keeping our hearts connected across the miles. Yet, every time the screen went dark, every time a call ended, I felt the absence sharply, a reminder that love could be both exhilarating and agonizing. And yet, in that absence, I discovered something powerful. Our connection wasn't dependent on proximity. It wasn't about shared streets or coffee shops or stolen afternoons. It was about the bond we had forged, the trust, the vulnerability, the raw honesty that neither distance nor fear could erase. Late one night, as I sat by my window staring at the city lights, a message from Lena appeared. No matter how far apart we are, you're still the first thing I think about when I wake up. And the last thing before I sleep. Always. My chest tightened, a mixture of longing and relief. I typed back quickly, my fingers trembling, always. We're stronger than this distance. We'll make it, Lena. I promise. In that moment, I realized the truth. Love wasn't just about perfect days or uninterrupted moments. It was about holding on through uncertainty, embracing vulnerability, and choosing each other over and over again no matter how hard it got. And I knew, deep in my heart, that Lena and I had found something rare, something worth fighting for. Because love like this wasn't fleeting. It was enduring. It was real.